All right, even as we figure out what the GST Council will do, we already know that GST collections are likely to be hit for the months of May and June because of the kind of restrictions that are there in various states. It's not a national lockdown, but most states in India, most places have some restriction or the other. What is then going to be the impact on the economy? So two interesting figures that have come out today in assessments, one by Barclays and one by State Bank of India. One figure is 5.4 lakh crore rupees and the other figure is 4.5 lakh crore rupees. Both are assessments of what is going to be the loss to the economy because of all of the restrictions in phase 2. The question then emerges that what about all of the businesses, the individuals, the families that have been hit? We know that we've seen some kind of a stimulus after the first wave of COVID-19. The Reserve Bank of India recently has announced some measures which will give a cushion to borrowers more than anything else and to companies which are ailing. NBFCs and small finance banks have got some cushion to go and lend further or to defer their loans. But is that nearly enough? On a day when there have been reports that the Finance Ministry is mulling a stimulus, we ask the question about whether it's time for a stimulus, what should that stimulus look like, and can we truly afford it? To speak on this, I'm joined now by Vineet Agarwal, President of ASSOCHAM, and Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist at Care Ratings. Welcome to both of you and great to have you on the show. Mr. Agarwal, let me just start by your thoughts and give us a sense of how deep the distress is. This time around, we are not hearing of too many job losses. So far, at least from corporate results, the last quarter is not reflecting all of the second wave, but it seems decent. Do you think that we have not yet seen how badly industry has been hit?
Good evening, Tamanna. I think corporate results are not necessarily the reflection of what is always happening in the economy because these are larger companies mostly. I think the pain that we have seen is essentially at the MSME level. And at the MSME level, if we think about the real pain, it's mainly the hospitality, the tourism, the contact service sectors have really felt the brunt of pain this time. MSMEs have started to get hit, I think, not just now with the lockdowns, but also because of muted demand a few months ago. Their receivables were slower. Their raw material prices, as you know, globally have gone up. So that has started to affect their costing as well. So yes, at all levels, MSMEs are the ones that are really getting hit across the board. And there is definitely a need for some kind of stimulus for them. Be it any level, it has to be concentrated, it has to be focused, and it has to be a combination of both state and center because there are certain people who cannot be given directly from the center. So states have to also step in and do their bit. And here what we have seen that the micro enterprises, the small shopkeepers, the street vendors, perhaps some working capital limits to them, some additional direct benefit transfer to them would be very, very essential to really salvage many of them. And the other people who are really getting hit are also the daily wage workers. Since there are less amount of available jobs, or rather in various informal, formal sectors, we are seeing that they are also feeling the brunt of the pain. So some relief for the daily wage workers would also be very critical.
So now what is the shape and form that this relief can take? Madan, let me come to you on this and let's just hark back to what we saw the first time around, which was mostly in the form of ease of lending norms or easy credit. Is that going to be enough 15, 16 months into a pandemic?
No, I think, Tamanna, when you're talking of a stimulus, it will have to necessarily come on the fiscal side. In fact, to put it very loosely, I would say giving a monetary stimulus at this particular point of time may not really work. And to use the analogy, I would say it's something like giving more sugar to a diabetic patient. We don't want more credit to be given right now because there are not too many takers for it. If there's no business to be done, there's no reason for you to borrow. Similarly, if you look at banks, there's been lots of reluctance to lend even today. So interestingly, when we had the SLTRO, which was meant for the small finance banks, we didn't see too much of enthusiasm in the first auction, which really means that giving more credit is not really going to help right now. Having something like a moratorium definitely makes sense. Something like restructuring on the financial side also makes sense, but we already have those schemes which are running. So I think the onus does fall on the government. Now, in terms of fiscal stimulus, I think tax cuts is something which will help a lot, both GST as well as in terms of direct taxes, depending upon if I'm talking of enterprise or you're talking of individuals. And definitely some kind of a pump up in terms of government expenditure. And just to add to what Vineet had said, I think at the state level, I think lots of things need to be done. You need to make sure that the local taxes not be paid, the local fees, which are the license fees for shops which are operating or are not operating but have to be paid. These kind of overheads, the electricity charges, the minimum electricity charges which have to be paid. I think if these are waived for as long as we have the lockdown, I think it will help a lot. But it has to definitely be more on the government side rather than on the Reserve Bank of India, because I think we've done everything we had to in terms of what the RBI could do last year.
You know, Vineet, give me a sense of the sectors which are being mentioned today, the ones which are truly hit and will continue to be hit for some time, like tourism, hospitality, etc. One can safely assume that these are not going to return to full form even if cases continue to drop like they are. It's not going to get back to a sustainable place till there is a widespread vaccination and herd immunity comes in. What are the ways that these businesses can be helped to even survive?
Yes, so certain measures that need to be taken, as we just mentioned, that they need to be given some kind of a stimulus, maybe some additional, for very, very small businesses, you have to give them some direct benefit money. Like, for example, the government gave for the Kisan Yojana. So some money goes directly into the hand. That's a survival methodology. However, I think, the problem is not just at the services level also. We are getting feedback from a lot of our members that at the smaller places, the factories have been shut down because now the larger factories are getting shut because they did not have enough oxygen in some cases, or in some cases, they had a lot of factory workers who were not who fell sick. So the job workers, the people who are one level below and the level below that, are the people who are really facing, and it is all across. It could be people in the metal industry, it could be people making small pumps, could be making locks, could be so every aspect of the business starts getting affected. So I think it has to be looked at certainly with the concentration with the industry that have been hit most. But there has to be something that has to happen for everyone to a great extent at the MSME level.
Madan, let me just talk about what the fiscal space is. Like you mentioned, it is now that the government has to step in, both central and state government. But we know that finances are not great. We will get a glimpse in the GST meeting this week what the appetite really is to cut taxes, and possibly even asking for zero taxes on COVID-related items may be difficult. In that scenario, are you really hopeful for any big bang stimulus?
No, I'm not too hopeful. We're really talking about what ideally should be done, because we saw last year there was enough space to go in for a higher fiscal deficit to really have higher expenditure. But what we saw was very much limited. I'm not saying it is right or wrong. It was definitely a model which we decided to follow, where the focus was more in terms of bringing in medium to long-term reforms, which was, of course, required. But if you're talking in terms of the immediate need, I think last time what we saw was direct relief being given to the poor. Now, this year we have seen a limited amount. I think they have spoken in terms of giving free food to people for 2 months. But is that really enough? It's really not enough. And again, to go back to saying that was meant more for individuals. But today, if we're talking in terms of consumption, I need to give certain tax breaks, discernible tax breaks, so that people get more money to spend. Lowering of GST rates, to my mind, will help because it will at least reduce the cost of affliction which is there today, because all of us are spending more money on preventives or in terms of getting cured from COVID or any other kind of diseases. And last of all, I think the government will have to focus on higher investment. So there are certain targets which have been laid down, and I think it will be useful in case those projects are allowed to take off right now. Unfortunately, we're approaching the monsoon time where typically most of the construction work doesn't really take off in a big manner. But I think something needs to be done at this point of time, and onus is both on the state as well as the sector. Because I think we've been very, very conservative in terms of those fiscal numbers of 3.5%, 6.5%, 4%. I think there's nothing sacrosanct about it. Given the kind of conditions we have today, I think spending more directly will definitely not be looked upon negatively by anyone.
What are the hopes you have, Mr. Agarwal, from the states? You mentioned that this has to be a center and state combination of relief. What are the kinds of things that you think state governments can come in from? I mean, tax rates is one part of it, and we'll have to see what the GST Council says, or if there are other kinds of taxes which are cut. But do you think at the state level there is impetus to cut tax rates? We saw some duty cuts in real estate in Maharashtra last year that gave a little bit of fillip, but even that has been now pulled back.
Yes, so that is essentially demand based. So since there was demand for homes, then there was a possibility of those cuts, and hence you could drive revenues as well. But I think apart from some direct relief that the states can give, what we just talked about, they should think about now the future. The future is that as we come out of these lockdowns, there would be requirement for jobs. Unemployment is already starting to move up. The jobs have to get created at the state level as well, which could mean that the states could implement several of the infrastructure projects that have been languishing. The states have to build the medical infrastructure of the country, be it hospitals, be it PSA plants along with those hospitals, increasing the number of beds and encouraging pharmaceutical production. So these are some medium-term to some long-term measures, but they all have to we have to start thinking about them at that level now, because as soon as we come out of the lockdown, there's going to be a demand for jobs. And the other sector that needs to be protected also simultaneously by the state is the agri sector. Because the agri, we know that so far the season has been quite good. The crop production has been good. We are expecting a good monsoon. So to make sure that the impetus remains on agriculture from the supply of fertilizer, seeds, and so on and so forth, we will ensure that if there is a next wave, we are definitely much more better prepared for it. So yes, the states have to start looking at now beyond just the basic stuff, but also for the next stage.
Absolutely. We need to start preparing for the next stage, and we need to make sure that businesses survive, small businesses survive. It's not just the big corporates, but there are entire sectors which need to just make sure they can make it through the next 6 to 8 months. Doing that on a hope and a prayer will not be possible. Thank you so much, Madan Sabnavis and Mr. Vineet Agarwal, for joining us on the discussion this evening.